on, ladies and gentlemen? It's the one and only James Williams, Dark Waters, and I'm back. And guys, in our community, I'm gonna start with saying it like this. In our community, there's very few times where you get an opportunity where like huge people like from YouTube come and hang out and just chop it up. It's so competitive that it's hard to get guys on the same page. I have What Lurks Beneath with me today, and I'm excited to have an opportunity to talk to him about everything that there is paranormal. So I think you should anticipate us bouncing around and just touching on every topic. You know, we might start off with Bigfoot's deodorant that he uses, and then we might jump on over to, you know, what kind of condoms Dogman use. I don't know, but I can tell you one thing. You're going to enjoy this conversation. What's going on with you, bro? How you feeling today?
Well, I gotta say, for everybody who doesn't know, and this information isn't all that public, but I'm a little starstruck. So for those of you that don't know, which is probably most of you, Dark Waters is one of the reasons why I even exist. Crazy enough, right? So years back, when I worked at this retail shop, I drive home, I had stumbled onto Dark Waters, and I thought he was an amazing narrator, and it was the Siege of Lockett Ranch that sealed the deal for me. The narration, the storytelling, the sound effects. And it was because of this gentleman right here is part of the reason I started doing what I was doing, and why, if you listen to like my really early work, why I started adding in like sound effects and like music in the background was because of this gentleman. So it's kind of crazy this conversation's happening, first and foremost.
I did not know that, bro. Wow, thanks, man. That's awesome sauce, bro. I didn't know that, man. That's crazy.
Yeah. And well, there's a few of them you did. There was one where a guy gets hired. They go to like the jungles of South America. There's like the harpies and stuff. Yep. I had joined the Dark Water like member thing where you like pay like $5 a month and you release stuff. I was like obsessed. Like it was awesome. And so it was just that's you are a part of history, my man.
Well, man, thank you, and congratulations on your success, man. I love to see.
Thank you.
You know, it's funny, bro. Like I tell this to other YouTubers all the time. Like, man, if you just put your mind to it and stay away from the stupidity, you can grow and blow up in this. It's just you have to put in the work, and it's like people don't want to do the work. And I know one thing I watched. I was like, yo, homie is putting in work. I would get the notifications like bing, bing, bing. I say, my man is putting in some serious work, and it pays off, man. But people don't understand it.
Yeah, you know, even now, like I'm talking to my team about how we can really just like refine things and all be on like the same page with like working on one thing. Because like right now, I have people like we're all kind of like it's a bunch of moving parts, and we actually just got off a discussion about it where like we're gonna really start honing in on like one video at a time instead of everybody doing different things. And so the end result for everybody is just a really well researched, well presented video. Like footage, you know, documentation. I know that's a big thing a lot of people have been missing. I'm really going to start treading into that territory. I'm letting everybody know now publicly before I start doing it because, you know, one thing, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, buddy, it's like one thing in this field, as much as I enjoy it and I get obsessive about this stuff, is just the amount of, can I swear, the amount of bullshit that exists and just this whole community, you know, and I don't mean that to take away from anybody's experience or anything that anyone's ever saw, but it's just that unfortunately there is a lot of just crap you got to wade through to get to the good stuff. And so I'm hoping to kind of enter in more of that territory and cover things that actually have substance and not just, hey, I was in the woods and I saw Bigfoot and I was scared. Thanks for letting me air the story, you know. So I'm going to add a little more. I want to kind of add more credibility to the field and you know, help everybody else in the process of doing it.
I'm with you. That's a dangerous territory that you're about to tread into, man, because what I found, bro, is no matter what you do, there's a contingency of people who won't be satisfied. So, for example, I just re-aired the interview I did with Blue out of Florida, where he's not only had the picture of Dogman, which you see the freaking face, he had a picture of Bigfoot, he had the video of Dogman running across the screen. You had the immediate interview with him, which was a 2-hour-long interview. And I'm sitting there, and people are like, oh, this is fake. I'm like, yo, dude, anywhere else in like a legal system, a judicial system, if I got video evidence of you doing a crime, I got a photographic evidence of you doing a crime, and I have an eyewitness saying you did it, and they all gel, you guilty. You know what I'm saying? It's there.
Yeah.
And it's just it's just one of those things to where there's a contingency of people in this field that no matter what you do, you can't satisfy them. And so what I've just done is decided I'm gonna ignore them and just keep on going, doing what I do, and make it happen. It's just I would just
Right.
say, put it out there, have tough skin, and just keep it moving, bro, because it's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, and really that's how you got to be. And while on that same token, it's the same with like the stories. People say, "Well, how do you know if that one's? How do you know if this is true or not?" And the answer is like you can't verify any user submitted story. And I know you've run into this too. Like unless you were there, you just your kind of job is just to job is to kind of just get it out there and literally let people make up their own minds. As storytellers, you just deliver the information in a, I guess, entertaining way, that keeps people involved and stuck in the story. But people ask me all the time, like, what do you think? What do you think? I want to believe like I'm obsessed with these topics, but like I do try to really keep that degree of skepticism and really be cynical about it and be like, I don't know. My favorite quote is from X-Files, where he says, "I want to believe," because I do, but I've never had an encounter with Dogman or Bigfoot. But I will say it's incredibly disturbing to me not just how many people have like very, very thorough documentation on their account, like they've written out and they've gone into all these details, but how much it connects with all these other accounts that you start to come across once you start digging that are very similar in description, very similar in behavior, physical characteristics. I mean, you could just go on and on. And then to couple that with the fact that there seems to be an information mitigation on all things cryptozoology, right? So anything related to Dogman, Bigfoot. I mean, like, if you think about it, it's almost a psyops to make it seem like it's just a joke or like you're not to be taken seriously. But then, like, an additional layer of security almost seems that they want to silence you, shut you up, that you're not allowed to talk about it if you do have legit information, right? So if they can't make you out to be crazy, then they got to silence you. You're talking too much. You're sharing too much. And so then, like, the part of me, I'm always like, okay, well then, if it's just a joke and if it doesn't actually exist, then why is there an active campaign against it? It's so strange. And that's not just Bigfoot and Dogman. It's like the whole thing, everything from people talking about, the whole, like, the Antarctica barrier that people can't go past to, like the whole hidden thing of like Atlantis, to even like cryptozoology and like mermaids in Zimbabwe. I'm like, the whole umbrella has this weird thing with it where information is not supposed to get out, and I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know if there is something being hidden. I don't know what it is and why they're trying to hide it. But anyway, this is all part of the reason why this whole umbrella has piqued my interest, and why I kind of just get obsessive with it.
Well, it's because information is power, and
Yeah.
everywhere around you, you see info wars going on. I mean, like information warfare going on. So information is
No, I know what you mean.
power,
Yeah.
and power is context. So information is the only thing that has the ability to change the mental context of a human being, right? If you add new
Yep.
information to the current context of a person's mindset, it's the only thing that really changes it. So in order to keep people trapped in a certain mindset, you have to try and build barriers around their mind. Because, for example, if you unlock to the concept, the idea that Bigfoot is real, just that one thing unlocking in a human's mind causes them to question their entire context of their lives. So they'll say, oh, so if Bigfoot is real, well, maybe 9/11 was a setup and they really crashed those
Right.
planes into the building on purpose. Oh, maybe this was fake. Oh, maybe this was fake. And so it's when you talk about psyops and you start talking about trying to control the public, it's definitely something that happens here. And because the paranormal field comprises right at about 180 million people who are active listeners across the board into the paranormal content and field, that's a sizable chunk of the population of America. And you
Oh
multiply
yeah.
that, it's a sizable chunk of the world population. So it is a chunk of people that are monitored and influenced. And it's done in these little stubble ways where it's kind of like a witness comes out, they'll have massive flags on their account where people are trying to embarrass them, their phone to start ringing, all these other different things. What I've found to mitigate that is there's this tightrope that you can walk. You can give truth, and you can give a lot of truth, but it needs to be presented in a format in which is already accredited format. So there's a lot of truth in
Right.
Hollywood movies. if people understand what they're watching. It's when you go out and you try and just take a dump truck of truth and just drop it on people. Not only do the people reject it, and I've experienced that, but then you draw too much attention to yourself. And for me personally, I'll be honest with you, and I've said this publicly plenty of times. I mean, I'm not willing to die on the hill over Bigfoot. Get a bullet in the head over Bigfoot. That's just dumb.
Yep.
I get a
Yep.
bullet in the head over my nation, my country, my children, my family, man, not over Bigfoot. So I
No.
give as much truth as humanly possible, but I leave the responsibility on other people to go and research it. And those who take the time to go research what I'm saying, like the stories of Roger and Steve, the people who researched Venezuela, the people who researched China, I mean, they really researched it. They was like, holy crap, dude, like it's there. I'm like, yeah, you can literally go there if you want to. I wouldn't advise it, but you can go there. And so that's just been my approach, man. That's just been my approach. Is give them truth.
I mean, yeah. To go with that, it's you're definitely right about the truth portion, because even people have like made notes. Oh, for example, like back in this was like March, I did a video on like the Dulce base, and it's funny how YouTube will automatically include a Wikipedia context, amendment to like the video saying like, oh well, Dulce base is a conspiracy, that there's these things, and a lot of people had made comments. They're like, why is YouTube like letting me know it's a conspiracy, And I don't remember in the script of that video coming off as like, well, this is as is. I think I was just presenting the information, letting you make up your own mind to that. But you're just starting to see like those little nuances, because I feel like with the internet, more truth is getting out, and I can definitely feel like there's an active campaign to convolute that truth with misinformation, or to either disprove what's already out there. In fact, I'm sure you know about this, but I want to say it was like maybe in the last 5 years that YouTube had a pretty active campaign where they were going through and removing quote unquote misinformation. So anything like, Illuminati, satanic ritual abuse, anything like crazy, well, what they would deem as crazy conspiracy stuff, it was just flat out either getting removed, demonetized, or just like you can never find it in the search engines. And I'm like, that seems awfully silly that you take all that time and effort to, completely erase that information if it was just entertainment. So I don't know, man. That's the kind of stuff that keeps you up at night, where you're like, like what if, and it really does make you start to lean on the side of like, you start seeing all these connections, and you're like, I don't know, like that thing, this is getting weird. This is getting weird. But I'm 100% with you, where it's like, I'm not about to go out there and like showcase proof of something and, have somebody just, knocking at my door, excuse me, what's your name? Yeah, like apparently you've been showing stuff, you need to stop, or getting a cease and desist or something. And so I'm very aware that my audience is larger, and that I'm aware that also puts a target on my back. So I try to be very careful with what I say and what I show and how I show things. So, and I do that for a very good reason. I've had conversations in private with several people about things that they know and things they've shown me. There's things I can never show people publicly that I'm like, yeah, this probably not like pictures of Bigfoot or Dogman, but just like things on like ancient cults and stuff like that there's like whistleblowers who have talked to, people who've like done this and lived this, and they want to share it. And I'm like, I don't know if we can do this, because I don't know if I'm really willing to like make myself that out there. You know what I mean? Like willing to put that big of a target on my back. So I feel you, man. It's one of those things where you really got to take caution with how you say and do things.
I agree with you. It's like I said, it's a tightrope. And the funniest thing, when you talk about like misinformation and the misinformation campaign, that started over the past 3 years, well, actually 4 years when things started being misinformation. I think 3 or 4 years ago, when they first started using that term, I said this was going to do damage to our field. I forgot whose interview I was on. I was like, yeah, this is going to do damage to us because we're an outlier, right? So in order to imagine a herd of sheep, right? Or a herd of sheep, but we're the sheep way out there on the other side of the mountain away from the herd. You got to pull all those sheep in and get them in line in order to get the ones that are closer to the mindset that currently exists. So you got to pull on them really, really hard. And when you look at, like, for example, the World Economic Forum, they just had their Davos meeting. When you look at one of the things that came out of it, they were talking about the destruction of the First Amendment due to using misinformation and disinformation. And so what it means is that somewhere behind a computer screen, there'll be somebody there who says, oh, I don't think Bigfoot is real, so this is misinformation. And you already see it with the Wikipedia inputs, where Wikipedia is at the bottom of, whatever your upload is. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about, the satanic cults, OTO. It doesn't matter. Alistair Crowley. No matter what you talk about, you're gonna find those things there, and that's kind of the trend that we're facing. It's something easy to deal with, but it's still a trend, you know. And I think people are going to buck that trend because as you kind of show people that, like, okay, well, you gave this information, and we're going to give you this information. The human mind says, wait, I've been listening to this content for 10 years, and now all of a sudden is this here, and so it's not going to work. It's just not going to work, but they're going to try it anyway.
Well, you touched upon a good point, the First Amendment thing. I could, with how things have gotten so just out of control, I can easily see them like, yeah, so it'll probably start with them making like addendums to the First Amendment, or either just abolishing it all outright and just saying like, well, you know, because misinformation is just becoming too much, we're just going to have to do it. And since it's under the guise of safety and protecting, you know, the civil liberties and the society hierarchy itself, I think most people are like, yeah, that seems fine. I mean, like, I've talked about this with several of my friends, like, look how easily people were able to, or were willing to give up their freedoms and privileges under the guise that they were going to die, like with COVID and stuff. And not going to get into that because that's a whole other thing. But it's just, it really goes to show you that really most people are willing to give up their rights under you know, for safety. And it's like, my God, like how much they can stage things to get away with, and how much, like what they can do in order to make you give up things if they really wanted to. And it's just like, wow. We're living in very fragile times, you know, very fragile times.
I don't even know if the times, it's the people. It's the people. The people are more domesticated, and
and that's what I mean.
Yeah, it's just they're domesticated. So anytime, you know, anything that comes across as scary, it's like, oh my God, I need you to protect me. Nah, bro, like for real. That's why. No, I don't need you to protect me, homie. Just get out my face and let me go do what I'm gonna do. You know what I'm saying? I got this, and that's the mindset that people have to have. Hopefully, I think people have learned a lot of lessons over the past 24 months. Hopefully, people are moving away from that. I kind of see that happening, like down here where I'm at, New Orleans. It's kind of always been that way, but more so you're seeing it come around again. Where people are like, nah, I don't trust nothing nobody telling me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm good. Get away from me.
Yeah,
so, so hopefully we'll get that. All right, man, let's get into some paranormal. Because I told you this conversation would go anywhere, bro. I knew this would happen.
Yeah.
All right, so let me ask you a few questions. All right,
Please.
When you're in this field, and if you don't want to answer this question, don't answer it, but this is kind of a tough one for most people.
Okay.
All right, when you're in this field, you, based on like conversations with people, based on content that you create, sometimes things happen in your personal life. Have you had anything scary, paranormal happen to you since you've come into this field and start doing this?
That's a good question. You know, it's funny you do mention that because there's been at least 2 times that I can count. Yeah, I'm going to say at least 2 times where since the creation of what I do and just doing what I do, now I don't have any that crazy, you know, cinematic story here, but I will say that these were weird and I can't account for them. I don't know how to explain them away. But I had a feeling, or maybe not a feeling, but it was as if somebody had actually like touched my shoulder, or was like trying to get my, like tapped me or poked me really hard from the back. That's happened twice. Very strange. The first one happened when I did a TikTok live. Probably was it 2021? It was within like the past couple of years, and I felt a legitimate, like somebody poked my shoulder, and I exclaimed. I was like, "Whoa!" Because it scared me. I just wasn't expecting it, and I turned around. Obviously, no one's there. I'm in the room by myself, so I'm like, "Okay, that's weird." I didn't think too much of it, right? And it happened again. Something similar like that happened again. Not that long. I'd say within the last year. I think it was like while I was shooting or something. I don't know what it is. I'm not saying it's anything. It's weird. It's, you know, obviously people could be like, oh, well, that's this. But, bro, I'm telling you, I've never had that happen to me before. Never had that happen until the last 2 years. So, you know, I've heard all sorts of I don't know. Yeah, that's really the only thing I could think of that has really even. Well, wait a minute. No. I should tell this one. So where my parents live, they live in town. And so oftentimes I will go see them. They're about 2 hours away. And I want to say this is probably around 2019. But I don't know if this is related to what I do, but it just happened at the same time. Anyway, and the way their house is laid out, you walk in the living rooms directly right there. You go down the hallway. If you were to go through the front door and go directly all the way down the hallway, it goes right to my parents' room. Obviously, there's a wall, and then it's the room. I guess it's a spare bedroom, but it's the room that I stay in every time I go to visit. And so in there, I have a desk set up, with a computer set up, all that. So I'm sitting in there one evening, and directly behind me is the doorway to the room. And I was sitting there working on something, and I remember feeling like somebody was watching me. And in my head, I'm like, oh, it's probably just, my dad, because my dad's always, he's always a jokester where he'll creep his head behind a door and just stare at me, just to kind of be like weird and funny. And he's done all the time as I was a kid, and I always turn around and I'm like, Dad, get out of here. And, we're laughing about it. And so I turned around expecting him to be looking at me, just being weird, and the door's closed. So I'm like, that's weird, because here I am involved in doing whatever I was doing, and I was like, oh, someone's looking at me. And so I've never had that feeling before, at least that I could really remember. So I'm like, that's weird. Now, since I turned around to respond to that feeling, as soon as I saw the door closed and had the thought that, oh, nobody's there, within, I don't even think half a second later, I could feel an actual gust of wind, not like a gust, but I could feel a breeze come at me. Yeah. It wasn't ice cold, like people associate with demons, but it was just a breeze of wind. And as this breeze is hitting me, I look up, the fan's off. The window's closed. There's no air coming out of the vent underneath the bed. And my first thought is, I'm like, okay, this is weird. I'm going crazy. I look down. I'm wearing a pair of cargo shorts this day, and I could see the hair all on my legs doing this. So there's clearly air going against me. And this is all pro within 3 seconds. Then I start to feel this electrical charge. It's almost, gosh, I'm trying to think. If any of you, I don't know if this is airing right now, if you're going to air it, but if anybody listening to this has ever been around, the science museums where you can put your hands up to the static thing and it does the electrical thing with your hands. I can't think what it's called. Or you kind of feel the tss of the electricity. I guess you just call it static. Mm-hmm. I kind of got that all around me, and it felt like there was energy. I don't know how else to describe it, but it felt like static electricity all around me. It was really strange. It was really bizarre. And I just said, in the name of Jesus, I don't know what you are, but you need to leave. You can't go. You got to go now. And it ceased. Now, that's not where the story ends, though. That did stop. But turns out, this was, I want to say in the evening time. Was it night? It was evening, so being 7 p.m. or whatever. The following day, because I stayed the night there at my parents' house, my mom came started talking to me, and so she's like, yeah, you'll never believe this. She's like, but last night I had something horrendous happen to me. And I was like, okay, tell me about it. And so she's like, I was in my room, I was reading my Bible, and she's like, this black apparition pulled up out of the ground and decided, tried to come at me. And this is only one of the few times it's ever happened to her. And I was like, are you kidding me? And she's like, no. And she's like, I said, what time did it happen? It was right around the same time that happened. So then I told her my experience, and I was like, I don't know if it was the same or what was going on. It was weird. It was weird. The only issues we've ever had really in the past, it's not like I've dealt with a family that's had all these paranormal things and hauntings. It's been pretty cut and dry for the most part. Years back when I was, maybe 6 years ago, I was dating my wife at the time, so we weren't married yet, but she used to hang out at the house all the time, and we could have swore that we saw a doppelganger of my dad. He'd go down the hallway, and he would go in the room, we'd go out there, he's at his computer desk, and we're like, didn't you just, and why are you in a different outfit? And he's like, what are you guys talking about? Very weird stuff like that. So unfortunately nothing crazy, but enough where it's oh, okay, that's weird. So that's about the extent of my paranormal escapades.
That's still wild, bro. That's pretty freaking wild. I tell you, you got to be mindful of those kind of things, because all that's designed to bring you into fear. And once a person comes into fear, bro, anything can be done to them. So it's just a good thing that you or your mom didn't come into fear. Everything that happens in the spirit realm starts with fear. The minute you allow yourself to be afraid of something, boy, they run roughshod over you. They run roughshod over you.
Yeah, and when that happened, I wasn't it was weird. I was just okay, and I think I kind of realized, I'm like, this has to be what it is. But there's that rational side of you that there's no way this is what it, there's no way. So it's like it's almost hard after it happens. It's almost hard for you to like process it. You know, it's almost like if anybody has like had a tragedy or like your first natural instinct is shock because your brain can't process. I don't know why, but it's almost like our brain has a really hard time processing huge trauma immediately. And you're in shock for a while, and then you know, grief starts, right? You start to feel depression, anger, but those usually don't start immediately, and it's a weird thing. And so it's like when those things happen, I'm like, there's no way this is what like it actually is. But I'm clearly seeing and experiencing something that I know for a fact this is not normal. You know, and you're trying to like rationally explain it away, and you're like, there's no reason this should be happening, but it is. I can share with you this. This happened. I don't know if I'd started What Lurks Beneath yet, but I think I was listening to you at the time. Maybe not the time that this happened, but during this time of my life. Same thing too. I was on the drive home. I had about a 45-minute drive home. It was about 10 p.m. at night. This is right around the same time I started listening to you. And so at the time I lived up in this kind of mountainous area. There's a lot of mountains, and it's a road that follows along this river. And I lived about 23 miles up the road. And there's no reason why planes should be flying around here at night, let alone as low as this one was. And so as I'm driving along, I look up and I just happen to see like, you know, lights, and it looked like a low flying aircraft. Now, what I saw wasn't like a disc shape. It wasn't a cigar shape. It wasn't an obvious UFO. I don't recall if I saw, you know, like an obvious shape of anything, but you could tell it's some sort of aircraft with lights on it. And, I look at it, but I keep looking back at it because I'm thinking to myself two things. Number one, why is it flying this like so low at night? It was really low. I'd say maybe no more than a couple hundred feet. We're in a very, very mountainous area, and this would have probably been, had it been an actual plane, probably I wouldn't even say a passenger jet, maybe like a 2-3 person plane, like very small. The other thing was it was really slow, and it was almost kind of like gliding. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, that's so weird. And as I'm looking at it, it all of a sudden kind of like stops and then just immediately shoots off to the right and just vanishes. And I was like, that's freaking weird. And I'm like, and the whole drive home, I'm like, there's no way that's what I think it was. Like, there's no way, right? But I don't know. The more and more I keep thinking about it and talking about it, how do you explain that away? Like, right? Like, that doesn't, physics don't work that way with planes. So I don't know. That's really all I got. And so, funny enough, all these things started happening, of course, probably right around the same era that I started this channel, or at least that might have been slightly before, but, you know, same idea. It's all around the same time.
Wow.
So, yeah,
sounds
fun stuff.
Like a freaking UFO to me, bro. Wow.
Yeah. I was like, wow, that's weird. Well, and then the thing that you got to do is you got to look into the history of the area, you know, and of course, there's tons of Bigfoot sightings around here. There's tons of, I don't know if people talk about UFOs as much, but people talk about strange things. There's missing persons and stuff. So it's like, yeah, you know, I don't know, man. It's one of those weird things. You just kind of gotta, I don't want to say keep your head down, but just like, okay, well, and just keep living your life. But it definitely kind of had me shocked for a while. In fact, there's like nights I'd be driving home and I'd be like listening to you or something, and I'm like, I'm expecting to see something, you know, but I never did. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know if I would have had the ability to handle something like that. So thankfully not. But yeah, you just always got to be prepared for seeing something. And I know in all the encounters you've ever read and I've ever read, I don't think anyone was ever going into something where they knew something was going to happen. I think everyone's pretty much taken aback by whatever they saw or experienced, which is part of the reason why they're like, hey, I got to tell people about this. And I know I'm going off here, but this is something you should know. So this didn't happen to me, but I don't know if you got a chance to listen to Joe Barger's story. I covered it. I don't know if you know who Tony Merkel is.
Yeah, I know Tony.
Yeah, I think he covered it as well. And then, gosh, Barton Nunnally, he was the guy who actually did the interview. He's also a good friend of mine too. And so, for those of you that don't know it, because this is good for all them. But basically, Joe was a truck driver, and he was driving up to the Manistee National Forest, and something had happened. I'm trying to think what happened to his tire. He had to stop and pull over at a gravel pullout, and he had to make sure everything was good. He gets back in his truck, and he's going up a grade, and so if anyone's driven a diesel truck out there, you can't obviously just floor it. You kind of got to work your way up. He's pulling a lot of weight. And what's crazy, he looks over and he sees this thing looking inside of his truck as he's doing about 25 up this grade. And when he starts describing this thing, I'm like, dear God, Joe. And like when he was actually telling this to me in person, me and Tony in person, he starts shaking, and you could tell he was definitely kind of like just choking up. And I mean, just physically describing how massive this head was, and that what this thing was doing, basically, in a nutshell, it was looking directly at Joe through the window, and then also looking down, trying to figure out a way to open the door. And he had his window rolled down, so he says he sees this big hand try to reach in, and it's looking for a way to open the door and grab a handle or something, and it keeps looking up at Joe, and it's just like, dear God, like when you hear this and you hear the intelligence these things have, and basically what had happened was he had his revolver and he shot it right in the face and killed it. And when he drove back around, he said the body was gone. And for any one of you out there that's listening to this and you want to hear the whole thing, just go check it out. He can tell it better than I can. But he believes that he was being flanked by this thing, that he feels like there was another one coming up on his left-hand side. Just crazy stuff, man. Oh, yeah. So then the story goes that after he made his way around, there was a couple standing by the road, and they were just kind of looking at each other strangely, and he kind of stopped by, and I think he had wanted to do a loop around to make sure that the body was there, or I can't remember his reasoning, but he's asking them if everything's okay, and they're like, yeah, we had heard some strange noises, like, is there two big bears back there fighting or something? And he goes back and he sees where he shot the thing, and the body's now gone. So whatever it was had drug it back. Well, turns out, I don't remember the time from here, not too long after, he actually gets accosted by two agents who told him flat out, you destroyed one of our assets. And they start like questioning him and threatening him. They took his gun and stuff. And it's just like, now, could he be lying? Absolutely. But the dude, if he's not, he deserves an Oscar nominee. Because, I mean, it's like, holy crap, dude. Like, this goes in deep. And, yeah. And so they obviously caused him some issues, and they were threatening him. They're like, if you keep perpetuating this, we can take away your license. We can make you piss dirty. There's a lot of things we could do to make your life suck if you don't stop talking about this. And so Joe was like, I kind of just stopped talking about it until now. And this was at the Dogman conference back in August.
Okay.
And so he hadn't spoke about it in like 4 or 5 years. And so, but he was like, I'm ready to talk about it again. He's like, I'm not going to be bullied into not talking about it. So since he's talked about it with me and Tony, I don't know who he's talked about it to. I don't know who he's presented it to, but that was probably the only eyewitness that I actually got to sit down with and talk firsthand. And so the thing is, like, to kind of give more background on that, Tony and I had just met and we started talking. I didn't know who the guy was, and Joe comes over. Yeah, and I think he kind of was eavesdropping, and he heard me and Tony talk about Dogman. And he's like, yeah, I shot one. And me and Tony stopped, look at each other, and we're looking at him. We're like, what? He's like, yeah, I shot one right in the face, and I killed it. And I'm like, please sit down. Like, we want to hear your story. And so he's like, all right. So he sits down, and he just like gives us the whole spiel. And me and Tony are like, oh my God, like it was just crazy. And I was like, you got to let me, like, we got to make people know about this. And so, yeah, that's just I'm just like, as we're having conversation, I'm like, oh yeah, like, you guys would probably think this is cool. But yeah, that was one of the crazier things that I think I've ever heard of, and that's really made me think. When an agent says, you've destroyed one of our assets, like, what the hell does that even mean? Like, I know what it means, but like, what does it really mean? Like, what's going on that they don't want us to know about? Of course, from there you can get into the whole land between the lakes. That's its own thing that you can spend a lot of time on. Yeah, I'll let you continue the conversation from here, because I could just keep going.
No, it's all good. It's when an agent says you destroy one of their assets, they're talking about what I've said over and over and over again, which is the genetically modified version of these beasts. And it's funny because there was this. How do I say this? I think I just say this. So there's truth, right? And if you want to hijack truth, what you do is you inject. Imagine a straight line, right? Straight line on a piece of paper. That's the truth. If you want to hijack truth and get that line to go crooked, you don't just erase the line because it's too obvious. You start injecting things and drawing little smudges on the line. Like, you make a little line across it, and then another line across it, and then a line on the diagonal, right? And so over the past 48 months probably, we moved from when we talk about the physical flesh and blood Dogman Bigfoot phenomenon, we moved to, there's werewolves out there, which are human beings who transform into wolves.
Right.
They're super soldiers that came from underground bases. There are all these different
Right.
things. When you go back and you do the real research on underground bases that exist, genetic modification that exists, if you look at our existing laws here in America, and then you try your best, which I've done, to actually follow some of the money that flows out, and all this is in public documents if you're willing to read a bill that comes out of Congress, all that stuff takes place in South America and places like Ukraine and some places in Canada. So what I found is that, there was this divergence from what I would say the truth about Dogman, the truth about Bigfoot, and there was this injection, kind of like you inject a turkey with seasoning. You know what I'm saying? Like you
Right.
hit it with a
Right.
big syringe, but it was injected with partial truth in big enough lie to try and get people off track. You know what I'm saying? And has guys. So
Right.
for you to listen, this has nothing to do with this guy's encounter about him shooting the thing in the head. I don't know. That's my first time hearing that encounter. But it came to the point to where the information was coming out about the genetic modification, right? And then it was like,
Right.
as that came out, then it was, yeah, they're genetically modified and they're from underground bases and they're part of a super soldier program and it's human beings that transform into wolves. And I'm like, whoa, 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 where all this crap come from? But when you go do the real research, you're like, nah, I could tell you where it's done down in Argentina. I can tell you where it's done here because the information's out there. But
Right.
the contingent of people who I wouldn't even call them controllers. I would just call them narrative changers. They know that people are lazy and they won't know. They know nobody will go read it. You know what I'm saying? And I'm gonna keep it
Yeah.
real with you. I've had a conversation with one of these guys, and he says, "Mr. Williams, you're a very smart person. We looked into your background. You really did have a secret clearance. Really did work for the Department of Defense. You really probably should have stayed with the Department of Defense based on the training program you on." I was like, "Yeah, I know. I didn't want to do that." And he's like, "Well, you're a really smart guy." And he's like, "But you do realize that it's too easy to shift the narrative anytime we want." I said, "Yeah, I know." And he's like, "So what are you gonna do?" I said, I'm here to do what I do. You know what I'm saying? Make a little money, take care of my family, have some fun, meet interesting people. I said the same thing I told you the first time we talked. Oh, okay, so you're gonna stick with that? Yeah, I'm sticking with that, bro. But the point is, they know how to shift the narrative off, and they know how to shift it, and just it doesn't have to change. Like for example, a 90-degree angle. You don't have to change it down to 70 degrees. It just needs to go to 93 degrees. That's it. And your direct path to where you end up is so far away from the truth as it goes down the line that nobody has the real truth. But it's close enough to the truth as it diverges and goes off to where you don't notice it until you get to the end of the road. And man, that's what happens as it pertains to the assets, the agents, which they are real agents, and Bigfoot, Dogman, and the other very, very terrible things that people are running into in the woods that nobody's talking about, which I think is very interesting. Have you heard of, or had anybody tell you any stories about this cryptid that has a triangular-like head? It's got a blackish, metallic-looking skin, but and then it's super long tail. I'm talking about like 12-foot long tail. Anything like that?
Whoa. No. Keep
Okay.
talking though.
Well, I've had a couple stories come in on that, and I haven't. I've only did two, and I don't want to do the rest of them because I'm trying to find more data on it and talk to more people about it. But as you start to roll out something like that, people start to inject. Like somebody will take and be like, "Oh yeah, I saw this triangle head thing," and they start making up and adding stuff into it. So
Right.
I've been holding on to it, just trying to see if I can get more information about it. But man, that's the most terrifying thing I ever heard of. I'm talking about absolutely terrifying, like Flash Gordon fast, deadly, terrifying. Like dogmen used to
Well,
hunt this thing, terrifying. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah, I mean, I don't know what you're saying here. And again, I'm not saying anything as fact. This is just from like, you research, I research. From what I've seen and what I've researched, it seems like a lot of things point to what people have told me as to who are supposedly on the inside, that there's rituals that like they open portals and things like that, and things will come through. I'm not educated enough in occultic rituals to know much about that. I mean, it's definitely a hell of a thing to think about, though. But one of the things that did disturb me, and this is something that Tony Merkel actually spoke to me about in person, and it actually is probably already aired and is done by now because this was in August when he told me about this, is that he was talking to a guy who was trying to keep his identity on the down low, but apparently he worked for it was like a small, I don't know what the place is called, but think of it like it's like a mini CERN within Florida. And he is like a military ex-sniper. He's got a bunch of kills. Maybe I'll talk to Tony again, see if I can find his credentials or whatever became of that. Anyway, long story short, this facility hired him to shoot whatever was going to come out. And when he told Tony that, Tony's like, "What the hell? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean shoot whatever's going to come out of there?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, basically, they use this dark matter thing, and they basically punch holes in time and space, and I'm hired to basically take care of whatever steps out of there. And so the story was told that apparently the scientists like punched a hole, I guess, a ripple, and they had heard this guttural growling coming from the other side that something big, and I quote verbatim, that something big was moving towards the opening, and that it was so terrifying that everybody in the room fled for their lives. Now, whatever it was never actually came out of there, but it was enough that it left a hell of an impact, and I don't know if he stopped doing it or if he was only hired there for a time. But I thought to myself, holy crap, like this rabbit hole goes far deeper than I can ever begin to imagine. You think you get down to a chamber and there's probably 6 other holes that go to their own chambers. And it's just like, dear God. Now, I mention this because if this is really going on and they are extracting other, entities from other dimensions or however deep you want to get with that, is it possible that these are things that are coming through? I don't know. I don't know. It's terrifying though. And my mother's a huge fan of like what we do, and when I say what I mean, like the community and just like what's talked about. And she's always made the speculation that it's interesting that now in like 2022, 2023, there's more sightings and more things happening of the supernatural realm into our realm more than now than ever. And I know a lot of people will be like, well, that's because technology and people can come forward with their accounts. And of course, we have to take that into account, and like that is going to be part of it. But I don't know, man. Like, I know you're older than I am. I'm only 32. But even like growing up, I know Bigfoot and the supernatural has always kind of had a stigma to it. But it just seems like there's more than ever in the last 10 years, people are coming forward with all sorts of stuff happening from like the 50s and 40s. And it's just crazy how much we're finding out. So I don't know. There has to be something going on. What? I don't know. That's part of the reason why I'm trying to set out to learn more and find out more what's really going on. But, just like you're doing, I think that's also part of the reason why, and like in my content, I'm always trying to be like, okay, like you have to make the decision on what you do, like what you think of with the information presented, just because not so much that I believe every single thing that like is written about, but it's more like, I know if I inject a lot of my personal beliefs in a very specific thing, I got to be careful, especially when you kind of get to the verge of like Illuminati, reptilians, that kind of thing, or like, the whole Dulce base, the 1979 like wars, that happened underground. That stuff is very fascinating. Like, I want to learn more about that, but I'm really, really skeptical to talk about any of it. People ask me, "Do you really believe it?" I'm like, well, I'm interested. Like, I want to learn more about it, but how much do I want to talk about that stuff before I make myself a red flag, especially with everything else that we know about and that, our peers talk about and things you learn. It's like, yeah, some things I guess should probably just be more private,
Yeah, some conversations are left for private, but then there's things that people need to know and understand. For example, like when you start talking about portal opening, um, the spiritual way that people open portals is through ritual sacrifice, which everybody knows,
Right.
which is blood
Yep.
sacrifice, because blood is currency in the spirit realm. So the
Yep.
blood of a cow is different than the blood of a chicken, which is different than the blood of a human, and those type of things, right? So there
Right.
are ways that people make sacrifices and open portals, and they bring things into this existence. That's going on throughout history. And then
Right.
when you start talking about the locations of the superhydrogen colliders, I can't say that name right, but everywhere there's those actual machines, which I want to say there's one in Austin, underground in Austin. There's one in Tennessee. I don't think there's one in Florida. We know there's one, the major one at CERN, which is actually the location of the seat of Satan, if you read it from the Bible. So they're doing that experiment with the biggest one in the location, which was biblically where Jesus said the seat of Satan was, right? So that's a whole nother
Particle accelerators, right?
right
Particle accelerators.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother ball of wax for people who really want to do some research. But everywhere those things are located, there's a higher, I mean, extremely higher amount of ridiculous paranormal encounters that people have. It for example, in Austin, where yeah, it's Austin where there's one. You're not hearing Bigfoot, Dogman, but man, I get ghosts, strange like humanoid looking creatures. I mean, just crazy, strange humanoid looking monsters, all kinds of stuff, consistently.
Yeah.
Even to where I had the story with the mobsters that were having problems out there, like just consistently weird, strange stuff that comes out of those locations. So there's definitely a connection. What I like about what I do is if you really dig down into the data points, like, okay, this person told me this encounter. Let me go ahead and start taking notes on this. Okay, where was it? Boom. Where was this? Boom. What did you see? Boom. It just spreadsheet notes, not a whole bunch of um, time, date, location, what you saw,
Right.
and then season, right? You start to look at that data, and you not only do you see patterns, but it's glaring information. Like, wow, why is all this happening in this city with this entity? Like New Orleans. New Orleans is a place where shadow people rule. Like tourists come down here, they go to hotels, shadow man at the end of their bed. You know what I'm saying? Because there's
Yeah.
hotels that's connected to each other that's old from the early 1900s, 1800s, but the buildings touch each other. And they're like, oh yeah, I saw a shadow person in my bedroom. Then next person saw a shadow person in their hotel room, and you find out that the two hotels share walls. It's like, okay, what the hell? What's going on? Go talk to the employees. Yeah, we see stuff all the time in the elevator, in the hallway, blah 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 blah. So it's geographical locations that have like these high amounts of encounters with various different strange and weird things. Um, and that's what I find most fascinating about it. Having an engineering mind. The only way I can stay in this is if I apply that mind, because it keeps me
Right.
from. It cuts down on the emotional aspect of reading a comment with some jack off who's saying something crazy that has
Yeah.
not done anything, done no research, and I can sit there and look at the data and be like, man, this is crazy. Look at all this stuff going on in this location, and then decide what I'm going to share and how I'm going to share it, to try and get whatever points of truth out there that I can without getting my head rocked off. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things
Yeah.
where it's fun, man.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Like we all know, of course, that there's stuff going on underground. I'm sure you're very well aware of DUMBs, as many people are, and that they probably have, and I believe they have an actual tram system that goes around and actually connects a lot of these. And how many are there in the United States alone? Like a couple thousand? Maybe I'm wrong on that number. It's a considerable amount, and so we have no idea what's going on with any of that, or what they're allowed or not allowed to do. It's off to the public. Now, one thing I think that's very interesting, and this connects Politis into the whole thing, because people talk about missing persons and this being a part of it. I think Politis is kind of the pioneer of kind of making that bridge of like, hey, there's missing persons cases, specifically national parks, but could there be a connection with this and, like Aurum, the supernatural? And I know he's kind of like iffy on like how deep he wants to make that connection, but it's interesting. And I don't know if he covered this story, but there's, I'll just, the brief story of it is basically a little boy went missing. The little boy was alive, but, he was told that some strange lady with like this weird thing on her face, like this writing or something, or like an image, took him down to this cave underground and have him like poop on this piece of like sticky paper. And apparently she got really mad when he couldn't, or he didn't have to go. And so she took him back up to where he was pulled or something, and that his parents found him. And when you start listening like this little boy and like hearing the account, it's like, it sounds like he's talking about a hologram, or something. And so I'm like, okay, well, I understand you got to take like that one account at face value and be like, okay, well, there's a lot of things you could take and not take with that. But it's like, okay, well, if things and people are being taken underground, like, is it possible that a lot of these missing people are being taken underground to be used for, I mean, God only knows what, like when you start when you start like really looking to like the grays and like human sacrifice and seeing all these things that are tied together, and of course I know you know all about adrenochrome, and I mean like there's the thing is the more you research into this stuff, the more you find out that a lot of these chambers that we start looking down the rabbit hole, they're all connected. All the tunnels go back to each other. And it's like you look at adrenochrome, then somehow you end up with things about like, sacrifice, and then you go cryptids, and it's like, dear God, they're all interconnected to some extent. And it's just, there's times I gotta step away because I'm like, this is too much. Like I feel like I know too much. And then in reality, you don't know nothing. There's unfortunately so much information that we'll never know. And sometimes I'm like, do I really, if I had the chance, do I really want to know all the horrible things that are actually going on? I really don't know if I really want to. I can only imagine.
I don't care to know. Bro. And I tell you, for example, I think about the injection of DUMBs, right? If you trace back where the DUMBs truly were injected into public consciousness,
right?
It started with the QAnon phenomenon, but prior to QAnon, there was little talk about DUMBs. There was just this kind of mumbling about DUMBs. Then when QAnon came along, it was DUMBs. It was explosions underground in the DUMBs. It was boom, 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 boom. And again, if you really just pay attention to the timelines, you can see where these things are injected in the narrative. It's not do they really exist? Of course we know they exist, right? The reason why they exist is because every actual government, like the real government itself, functions from underground. So right. you got Congress, you got the Senate, you got the White House, blah bada bing bada boom. Those are facilities where people meet. But if something goes wrong, there's these things underground where people flee to, which is why politicians tend to be like, oh, I'm not worried about a nuclear war because me and my them and their family will be on the ground while all of us are getting blown to bits, right? But nonetheless, that's where your real government resides. So when I hear people talking about DUMBs, I always say to myself, okay, who am I talking to? What do they really know? What part of this are they talking about as far as, because that's where all true governments exist. You look at Russian government. There's the facility. I mean, the actual guts of what makes that government tick it's below ground. And that's just for safety and security reasons. So how much of it is actual government facilities where they're moving back and forth, and really how much of it is actually some secret experimental crap that's underground? So I think it's kind of gotten to the point to where it's extremely popular and nobody really knows, what's there. But we do know for a fact that all the contingencies for the American government exist underground. And so, like I said earlier, when you really do the research of where bad things happen outside of our country and they're imported into our country. They happen underground outside of our country where it's a lot easier for people to go missing, for people to come up, sliced up in the woods and nobody worry about it. And I've told this to people that were researchers, say, go and look at the number of missing people in the national forests and parks in other nations and compare them to the number of missing people here, and you will see the data. You know what I'm saying? But
it's weird.
It's crazy, weird, man. Bro. It's insane. It's like 10x what happens here.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It's like, listen, like with missing persons, I know again you have to account for accidents, people just like literally legitimately wandering off and dying, human trafficking. That's a given. But we're talking about the complete insane number of people that just they were there when now they're gone. Like, how is that even possible? And like you were saying, like, just the amount of like when you overlay the maps and stuff, when people are talking about like the amount of locations that people go missing with national park, it's nuts. And obviously there's a whole conspiracy around that as well, that they want to keep things quiet because, again, revenue. If they were to be honest and start talking about things that actually is out there, I can't even imagine the billions of dollars in revenue they would lose. Not to mention, society would probably go crazy, and you can't have no order. It's like, and I'm sure you know this, it's like Caesar said, if you give people bread and the circus, they won't question what you're doing and what you're not doing. They're entertained. I almost wonder if that's a part of the reason why the entertainment industry even exists and why people are paid so much, is to keep you preoccupied so that you don't know what's going on. Now, to add to that, I thought this was very entertaining or interesting. It's because I said the word entertainment; it was stuck in my head. Jim Carrey, and people said this was just a bit, but it was kind of a weird bit to do on public TV. You might know about this. This is probably like in the last couple of years that he went on like Jimmy Kimmel, and he's like, I'm so tired of like the secrets and things being hidden from the public, and he's like, I'm here to just dispel all that. And he starts talking about like that these producers will make all these entertainment shows so that way you, the public, doesn't know what's going on. And for the people that are saying it's a bit, like Jimmy Kimmel's looking at him and he's kind of like laughing, but you can tell like he's nervous, like what are you doing right now? And he's talking about like he's showing the, I don't know if it's actually like the secret sign of the Illuminati, but he's like, yeah, he's like, I know you're in it. He's pointing to Jimmy Kimmel and just like stuff that it's like, is he like having a legit moment? Now there's people that were saying in the comments that they're like, oh, can't you hear the audience laughing? But when he did this, like in real time, nobody was laughing. They had to add that in afterwards.
Right.
And you just had these weird moments like that where it's like, did he just what was that? On that note as well, I don't know if you might remember Tila Tequila. She was this big like pop star back in
I remember her.
2005. Yeah, and then all of a sudden she just disappeared, right? So people say she's crazy. Now I'm not adding anything to her, her credibility or anything, but it's also interesting that she like completely disappeared from the limelight, and she came out, I want to say like maybe in the last like 7 or so years. Again, take what she said with a grain of salt, but that she was like, yeah, like there's a lot of shit that goes on behind closed doors that you wouldn't begin to, basically all the things that all of us who watch this already know about that's going on. Things about ritual abuse, sacrifice, being coerced into doing these horrible things for ludicrous amounts of money. I mean, it's the entertainment industry. Again, it's just further validation of like what we already know is happening. And of course she was, shunned and like, discredited, which again, that's the first step in any psyops, campaign, is to do that to your enemy. And so it's just, you see these things playing out and you're like, this is basically my favorite quote of all this. The way you can summarize this is, everything is there for the eyes that can see. It's all laid out. It's all there. But most people don't have the eyes to see, and for those of us, for those of us that do, it's terrifying. Not like in a sense where like I'm scared, but just like the fact that it's so organized and on such a level that it is what's terrifying, and how much power is behind it. It's just like wow. No, and so really, oh no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say you're 100% right, and I found myself to the point now where I can tell who the good guys are by how hard they're attacked. And the harder a person is attacked and defamed and destroyed, that's the person I listen to. So if there's somebody on the news that everybody and their mama is saying is evil, is bad, is stinky, is blah, blah. Okay, let me go see what this guy's saying, because he must be saying the right thing. Or what this girl is saying, because they must be saying the right thing. And it's like we live in an upside-down world. You know what I'm saying? Upside-down world, it's like, okay, whatever everybody says is bad, go check and see if it's good. And it turns out to be good. For example, there was a time period where vitamin C and vitamin D were bad for you. And I was like, hold on, bro. My whole entire life, people been telling me to drink me some milk. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, what you trying to tell me? And I remember this. My daddy saying, boy, you need to drink your milk so you can get tall and strong, have strong bones. And I'm like, hold on. You trying to tell me that vitamin D is bad for me? Man, I'm done. And so it's upside down.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things to where, like you said, those who have the eyes to see, and more importantly, the ears to hear, man, you will, if you pay attention, you will see the truth, because it's glaring right in front of you as it pertains to everything. I mean, it's literally like a shiny object right there in front of you.
And well, and again, for anybody who listens to this who knows anything about how and occultism, how they communicate, it's all symbology. It's part of the reason why the Illuminati, they all have the eye thing, and they put metaphors, and maybe not metaphors, but I guess symbolic metaphors, and just symbolism in everything from movies to pop culture. It's everywhere. And if you're looking for it, you'll see it all over the place constantly. It may just be a quick little thing, but if a regular person is watching stuff, they won't catch it, like they won't pick up on it. But I look for that stuff all the time. I'm like, oh, there's another satanic reference, Or even if sometimes if someone's giving a speech and they'll do a certain thing with a hand, I'm like, it's just crazy. So like a few years back, I really kind of got into like how in occultism, how they communicate, and it's all symbology. Now that doesn't mean I'm into occultism. It's just I'm just curious how they orchestrate their communication, and it's all in secrecy, right? It goes back to the whole like Freemasonry thing, and these are all discussions that we could spend 5-6 hours like going down into. Obviously we don't have the time for that, so we're kind of just like barely like touching upon these little topics. But again, it kind of goes back to everything correlating, and like you were saying, we literally are an upside down world. And if that hasn't been more apparent than in the last couple of years, then I don't know how to make it any more clear for some of these people. Unfortunately, a lot of people like drinking the Kool-Aid and denying that there's not things going on. But I think for myself, if I was a government and I wanted to do nefarious things, of course I would do these things to my society. I wouldn't want them to know what's really going on. And if you're understanding it from the perspective of there's some hierarchy, satanic overruling of some kind, some sort of Luciferian thing going on, then like, of course, like your whole mission is to deceive and control and, of course, like maybe possibly reduce the population, whatever it is you want to do, right? I'm not saying these things as fact. I'm just saying like a lot of things are sort of pointing in this direction, right? That's all I'm saying.
Those things are fact. Those things are fact, bro. I know it. I'll say it. Those things are fact, bro. It's in documents. It's documented in white papers. Those things are facts. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is, bro. It's just a matter of navigating what's going on right now. It's factual. All that's in writing and it's everywhere.
Even like the guide stones. Well, like what the hell's that all about? I know you know what the guide stones
bro,
are.
That was crazy, man.
Yeah. And it's like I don't like what was that to me, like that's either one thing. Either there's an actual like person out there who's trying to like be a hero and blew them up, but more than likely it's somebody who's trying to destroy it, maybe to detract attention away, or possibly to either create a distraction. Because I know this, that whenever there's like a big thing covered on the news, and I don't know if the guide stones are really a big thing covered on the news, but for a perfect example, the Amber Heard case, right? That is a pretty irrelevant, stupid thing to our lives, but it was covered for like, what, a month. Now get this, right? This is just another PSYOPs thing. Sleight of hand, right? You keep the people looking over here, look at this, while we go ahead and do something over here. So why was that covered so much? Like, what were they doing behind the scenes to keep you distracted? I'm always thinking that sort of thing when like they're really pay attention into something, or really putting something out there on the news a lot that really has it doesn't pertain to anybody's personal life. It's not like a technological breakthrough or anything. It's just, here's entertainment. And why? Like, what did Johnny Depp have anything to do with? Like, why did that need to be covered? And so it's you're really dealing with master occults, or master occultism, and master occultist and all psyops. And when you have those things going on, people are always like, well, it's because people are dumb. No, it's honestly just at that point we're talking about like mind control. When you have people who know how the human brain works and how like the functions and the frequencies that our brains are tuned to, and how you can deconstruct and rebuild the brain, this has nothing to do with IQ or intelligence. Unfortunately, this has everything to do with like a complete mind control. And unless you're not in that, I mean, the more I talk about this stuff, the more I'm like, gosh, this is dark. This is getting dark.
Bro. And think about it. Watch this. This is how crazy it is. So if I'm not mistaken, the Ukraine war started in late February 2022. So February, March, April. Right as it was kicking up is when that Amber Heard trial started. So that was in the news, covering up everything that was going on in the Ukraine war, if I'm not mistaken. If I remember it correctly, because I remember sitting there saying, wait, we got a war going on that's going to end up having us fight NATO, but everybody's watching this broad on TV with Johnny Depp. So it was like they couldn't roll it out quick enough to to take up the news cycle, but it occupied the news cycle for a very long time. And if you remember, we came out of that, and then it was war coverage, and it was like, okay, we're not ready for them to know about this war. Then after we came out of that, boom, war, and it was like, come on, man. So it's almost as if people call it the Matrix. I think that's an insult to God. When people are like, oh, you can read the code of the Matrix, I think you're insulting the Most High Creator God, Jehovah, when you say that. So hope you get hit by a lightning bolt. But I'll say it this way: there are things that if you understand how to read the news and actually see what's going on, you'll see the cover up. If you go 3 months or 2 months prior to whatever that big news story is, that's what it is. And then as soon as that cover up story ends, it's going to be rolling to the next cycle of whatever the next thing is. And then there'll be another distraction that comes. So every distraction the timing is off sometimes, but it's always a distraction there for people.
Yeah, no, and again, like kind of going off what you're saying, just how well orchestrated. I mean, again, it would have to be because like all MSM, for those of you who don't know what that's mainstream media. All MSM is basically tied to the same thing too. I know people take up arms about Fox or CNN, but I'm like, you don't think there isn't like one massive agenda here to push? I'm like, come on, guys. Like, of course that there's this massive correlation because why? What's the point of MSM? To create and make you think a specific way. So there can only be a mono narrative, right? And that narrative has to exist across everything, right? So that way everybody just believes and thinks one certain way, and you're seeing that more than ever. And people talk about the political divide, and I think you got to look further than that. I don't think it is a political divide and an ideology divide, but what you're really seeing is the hive mind. You're seeing how hard they're pushing the hive mind and how many people who, if they're on this side of the spectrum, they check all these boxes for what they stand and believe for, or it means what they believe for. There's no longer the individuality of like, oh, I'm this, but I also believe this. It's just black and white. And if you're not that, then you're all these things, racist, homophobic, xenophobic, this, blah, 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 and you're a hater and you're this. And it's like, I'm a Democrat, I'm a center, I'm a Republican. Like, it's a crazy time. And I'm not trying to make it political. I'm just saying like that. It reminds me again of the whole psyops, like, tactics where like they can totally write you off because you don't fit into the hive mind. And even growing up, like, of course there's always like the Republican Democrat thing, but it doesn't even seem like it's like political anymore. It's a complete moral ideology, like way that you view and live your life. And if you don't fit this bubble, like there is something wrong with your character, your ethnic, or your ethics, your moral, everything. And it's like this is it. Like this is the mindset they want. This is it, and it's scary, man. It really is. Because before it's like people would get along, but now it's like if you don't fit in this, well, you can't be my friend. How could I possibly be a friend with someone who supports this? And it's a wild time, man. It's a really wild time watching all this unfold, and it's really even in our community seeing this kind of stuff pop up. And of course, we all know how political correctness is kind of coming in and destroyed a lot of things, unfortunately, or I guess I should say complicated things, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of this stuff has been well in the works for a long time. This is all, at least I believe a lot of this stuff has been planned out way ahead of time, almost like a T of exactly what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. Even like the whole, like, the everyone's talking about with the WHO, the World Economic Forum, or maybe that's not the WHO. Anyway, like the whole like Great Reset, like, we don't think this has been in like the motion for a while. I really doubt a bunch of guys sat around and were like, you know what, this is going to happen. It's been in the works for a long time. In fact, I think just about everything we're seeing has probably been in the works for a very, very long time, and just things slowly get put into place. You have to wait, for years and generations. That way you could just like, if you, hopefully none of you out there have actually cooked or boiled a frog alive. But if you did, you wouldn't put them in water immediately. You'd slowly let the water warm up. So you slowly start putting narratives out there, and you very slowly change the mindset of a generation. And from like, for example, like the 1970s till now, 50 years, right? Look how drastic the mentality, not just the moral mentality, but the overall mentality of someone who's 21 then versus, say, like for you, when you were 21, completely day and night. And not just on a moral level, but from like a work ethic, entitlement, everything. I'm talking about an entire character, like who you are, your ego, everything, night and day. And it makes me think, I'm like, what if time was never an issue for these people? What if it was just they'd follow the plan? I know I'm spewing a lot out here at you, but
no, I'm with you, bro. I'm following you. I'm smelling what you're cooking for sure.
Yeah.
It almost seems as if time could not be an issue for these people. Like you are some entity outside of time and space that is planning this, and it's just rolling out, which is, I'll tell people all the time when I do interviews, people are like, I can't believe you believe in Jesus and the devil. I'm like, bro, if you've seen, heard, and talked to the things I've seen, and talked to the witnesses I've talked to, and then had your eyes open the way my eyes have been open, you would clearly know that there is another force that's guiding these things that happen, and that force has to have been here for a very, 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 very long time. And it's just different actors, different suits that people are in that play their role. Oh, you do this part for the next 20 years, and then you do this part once he dies for the next 20 years. But it's all going down the same timeline. And a replay of cycles that happen over and over again. All right, buddy, we're running up on the end of time here, man. I don't think I need to tell anybody where to find you because I think everybody knows where you are and who you are. So I'm going to say this to you, man. I really enjoyed this conversation. I am
Likewise.
down for these kind of conversations at any point in time. I think we got to find a way to hold like a hardcore discussion off of YouTube where we can really just spaz out. Maybe me, you, and
Oh
Tony
yeah.
just go clean off because, man, it'll be
Oh
crazy.
yeah. Oh yeah.
But these are the kind of things that people in this field need to hear. You know what I'm saying? It's
Right.
it's like people get trapped into, I want to talk about Dogman, I want to talk about Bigfoot, I want to talk about black eyed kids. And what I found is that if you're dealing with someone who's in this field, that's a creator, then their mind is completely wide open to everything that's going on, and they see all the pieces of the puzzle, as opposed to
Correct.
some of the other creators that I've spoken to who are like, yeah, I don't believe any of that. I'm like, bro, you got to be done lost your mind, like for real, bro. But they're in the cars, and I'm like, yo, dude, like you don't see this? Nah, I don't believe that, James. You're tripping. Like, all right, keep on building your cars, and when that EMP goes off, you won't be able to drive them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel like everything, you think about everything in life right now in society that's, I guess, quote unquote entertainment. It's almost like from a spiritual point of view, it's just designed to distract you keep you from understanding the truth. What's the truth? Well, I think we know the truth, but a lot of people, they like to, again, like the devil says, I can give you bliss for days. I can deal you bliss all you want. But it's when people get the truth, now it comes accountability. That's hard. That a lot of people don't like to deal with the hard news and the hard truth. I think most people, it's easier to just sit with the bliss and ignorance their whole life. And it's once you get the truth, you're like, this is a hot seat, man. It's a hot seat for sure.
All right, buddy. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll get back together soon, chop it up,
Yep.
make some things happen, and I really appreciate you joining me, my friend.
Absolutely, man. It's been a pleasure. We'll talk soon.
All right.